I'm a little bit starstruck. But what a gift to be discussing these themes with this crowd. And we're trying to get into some of the really big topics. But I think that one of the things that was implicit in what we heard this morning, but maybe I'll just make the point that this is about convergence. And one of the things that's really difficult when you're moderating a session like this is that you start to see the potential for every question to kind of go into every topic. So that's going to be a bit of a challenge for us today to try and kind of keep to some sort of track, because every single thing when we talk about the pressures that are coming from new fuels or from new technologies or from the labor shortage, it's all connected, it's all interrelated. And the one big theme, I think, through all of that is around the decisions that we take and the priorities that we choose to work on as in each of our different stakeholder positions that we take. But of course, as Simon also pointed out, collaboration, I think I'm going to quote him, collaboration is no longer negotiable, right? So how do we kind of, again, stay focused on the bit that we need to work on and get right, but keep in steady track with each other? So that's our challenge here today. And as I said, let's hear more from the panel and a bit less from me. So I'm going to start off with, I think it would be remiss of us not to focus on geopolitics as the starter. And the reason I say that is because I'm old enough to remember when that wasn't even a topic when you talked about big industry themes. You know, geopolitics didn't come up. Now, here I am starting and kicking off with it. And of course, that's super real and present for us now in the Strait of Hormuz. So I'm going to start off today with both Stephen and Francesco. I think I'll come to you first, Steve, because for the first time in my life, something from the history books for sure, but in my lifetime, we've had seafarers as a legitimate target by a state saying seafarers are a target. And that's really got to change the relationship that we have them as our employer and employee, right? That's a difficult thing for us to get our heads around. So, Steve, I mean, how are you looking at that? And not, yes, Hormuz, but more generally, we're in this age where things are much harder to predict from that perspective. And how are you looking at that?
Good morning, everyone. It's great to be back. And stalwarts, heavyweights, Simon, Rob, many good questions already. But to come to the reality, I don't think I can remember a time, and that is significant because I think it's more than 35 years, that the world has been in such a conflict. And it's not just the Strait of Hormuz, it's conflict at the IMO, it's conflict about UN systems, it's conflicts about the rule of law. And so when we look at all of these issues, we can't just say to our budding cadets or the future seafarers, they're now tools in a global game about who wins, and we're not really clear wins what. Is it land, is it power, is it money, is it technology? So the question for the ITF has been really back in focus. I've got some amazing folks with me here today, and Oleg, everyone knows Oleg. He's still amazing, but they've been dealing with the seafarers from that crisis management. So you've got this enormous backdrop. Well, Oleg's come all the way from Ukraine and he's been living with this quite some time as well. We're in a stage where shipping is under threat. Very good point about the visibility. We were nowhere before the pandemic. We reappear, we dropped off again, and here we are again. But the challenge for the ITF is, how do we help the people? How do we rely on the frameworks we've built? I have to say on the record that I remember when we couldn't agree from one employers group, whether it was a National Ship Owners Association, whether we couldn't agree what a war zone was. This time we had a high-risk zone within a day, and we had a war zone by the Wednesday after the conflict started. That is because of the work, I should mention David Dearsley, who passed away, he's a great forward thinker, would have loved this session. So the challenge for us is, how do we take what we've built, that collaboration Simon mentioned, the teamwork, having such different folks in the room, and how do we make sure that we're relevant? Now, I think on the geopolitics, I'd love to say that the ITF can roll into Washington and make a significant difference, but I'd be deluding myself. And that's a reality. So we have to learn, and again, I think when we talk about shipping, we talk resilience. And I think resilience is also part of our problem. And when we're invisible, we just get told these are the regulations. I think there's a better collaboration now than ever I remember. So that I would argue just a little bit on the flip side. ITF still has relations, naturally, with the United States, still with China. Unfortunately, we're banned in Russia. But the reality is you still have to have those relationships, but the value of the stakeholders becomes more and more critical. What are we going to do to look at what they need to have? So when I'm not a seafarer, so I can't talk about which bunk I had and why the hell crew accommodation doesn't change from 1980 to 2026. It still looks and feels the same. We might have better technology, but it's not home away from home. So there's lots of things that we need to think about. How do we help each other? And I think issues like today and maybe concrete outcomes in the different partnerships we have. What are we going to do? We can talk about it, but for me, I don't think I've known a time where we're under more duress. I don't think I've known a time when there's more stress for the shipboard crew. And all of the issues we discussed, which we'll go through in step by step, we have answers, but they all base on the fact that we respect each other. We sit around the table and we discuss what they need. So we need to make sure we know exactly what you need. Technology can help with that.
Well, we'll get to the technology piece, I think. But for now, Francesco, if I can come to you, because you mentioned COVID. There is parallels for sure. One of the parallels I'm just going to focus on at the moment is that you had that situation where a lot of seafarers trapped on board, unable to get off. A lot of people unable to work. And it seems to me that in this kind of global situation, this dynamic, we've got to try and balance people not being coerced into work and feeling, that they're in harmful situations, but also that people aren't prevented from work. And we had a situation until very, very recently, which I think you resolved together, and you can explain about it. But that seemed to be the fundamental debate there, because it had serious ramifications. And I can give my perspective on it, but you're probably going to say the same thing.
So, yeah. First and foremost, thanks to everyone for the great attendance. We're very proud to have put up this conference that is so well attended. I'm really looking forward to the day. How do you follow someone like Steve? I'm always stuck behind him in these panels, and he does such a great job in setting the scene. But let's go back to your question. Yes, if you remember, when we had to deal with COVID, a lot of work went into trying to repatriate seafarers safely, but most importantly, trying to keep jobs alive for people. And being able to deploy people was a massive challenge. And you will recall we had a role in setting up the first ever Seafarers Quarantine Center in the Philippines. And it's still something that I'm reminded of every once in a while. In this particular case, and just to tie up with what he was saying about us setting things up fairly quickly, I think the bombing took place on a Friday evening. The IMEC board met on the Saturday morning, and by the Sunday we were talking to ITF, and on the Monday morning we had a designation in place. I thought it was very good. I thought there was a united approach, a unified approach by both sides. The social partners did really act as social partners. And at the beginning, it was very difficult for people to actually be able to exercise their rights that we gave them, the right to repatriation, the right to refuse to sail through what we then defined as a warlike operations area. Then that became possible. Flights started to become available, launches started to become available, people could come off the ships. And then the next obstacle was, well, we can't leave the ships without anybody there at anchor. We need someone to replace the people that want to go home. And funny enough, maybe because of the incentives, but there was a lot of people that wanted to do this.
Yeah.
And our obstacle became a particular country, I mean, the Philippines, the elephant in the room, banned all deployments to the Gulf. That actually brought us back to where we were with the COVID situation, where you have a large number of people who depend on those jobs, depend on those earnings, who weren't able to actually go and earn that money. It took a lot of lobbying, but again, as we've been saying all along, partnerships and cooperation is essential. It's no longer optional at this stage. And so the fact that we were involved with the Philippines government, and we do have an advisory body that sometimes is used well, meant that we were able to actually make him see reality, make him see the consequences of those rash and perhaps impulsive actions. And happy to report that, what is it now, around 10 days ago, they issued a new circular which relaxed that ban, and it made it a much more reasonable approach, where a risk assessment would be brought in to actually justify some of those requests. We're happy to report that Filipinos are now joining vessels again, and people that wanted to go home from the Gulf are actually being able to go home. And at great cost, I should add, to our members. And that's something that should be recognized, because I had, I don't know, 20, 30 requests for interviews with major publications. We're not talking about the trade winds and the Lloyd's list of this world, people that obviously are dedicated to our sector. We're talking about your CNNs, your Bloombergs, your Washington Posts, and so on and so forth. And every time, what they wanted to hear from us was stories of hardship, drama, and seafarers suffering. And whenever we were telling them about the success stories, they sort of switched off. And I got to a point where I refused to do interviews unless we can talk about the stuff that actually is happening, as opposed to the cases where, and unfortunately there is some standardship. They're not our members, but there is some standardship, particularly in the Gulf. We wanted to talk about the good stuff as well, because that doesn't help us. Focusing just on the negative, when actually there is so much work being put in by people in this room, in fact, by this sort of organizations, that gets ignored because it's not sexy. We go back to the sexy word that Craig was talking about. The fact that someone is paying 4 times the salary, or someone is paying a flight cost that is 3-4 times what it was, water 5 times. That's ignored. It's a give me.
Yeah, well, we'll come back to a couple of those themes, but I think you've kind of led us naturally to sort of say, what is the seafarer experience right now? And of course, Simon, running the helpline, hearing directly from seafarers. But maybe start off by sort of explaining sort of where we are from the Gulf perspective, and then maybe widen the aperture a little bit to more how are we doing?
Yeah, so initially about repatriation and rights and concerns from families, of course, about what was happening to their seafarer, the stresses and strains of being in that sort of situation. It's died down, actually, in terms of the number of calls that we're getting at the moment. And of course, we don't really know everything that's going on in the way that these gentlemen do. But we're actually just looking at 2025 as a whole, actually, and what people have been telling us on our 24/7 helpline. We're about to publish a report. And it's interesting to see what the themes and trends are for seafarers. And I think it's also worth bearing in mind, of course, a helpline, people don't call us to tell us about what a great day they're having or how much they're enjoying their career. So it can tend to be a bit doom and gloom. But nonetheless, I think it's an important snapshot of what is going on out there for seafarers. Now, firstly, we're seeing connectivity is having an impact in that people can get access to the internet, so they're dealing with all their normal inquiries that they might have come to us at one time. So actually, when they are contacting us, it's about more complex issues. Conversations are longer, it requires a lot more follow-up. We're also seeing that they can contact us while they're in crisis, and that's actually happening. And that's not just self-reporting, that's also crewmates, officers who are contacting us concerned about one of their crew. When people do contact us, which is mostly by live chat and web and WhatsApp, they're actually testing out, is this AI? Because they do want to speak to a human being. So we're actually seeing that go on. And the issues that people are facing are multi-layered. It's not just one issue. It's isolation, away from family, those kind of challenges that have always been there. But it is concerns about the danger of seafaring, the fatigue, the stress, the pace of technological change. We're seeing a greater recognition of mental health issues and actually more of a willingness to speak about it, which is clearly positive. We are hearing about harassment and bullying, persistent disrespect or intimidating behaviour from people in authority. Women are experiencing a disproportionate level of bullying and harassment in their work. And many seafarers have significant financial responsibilities, debts that they've built up in order to be able to go to sea. And underlying all of those issues is the fact that they don't have a secure livelihood. If you're working from contract to contract, it means that when you provide a remedy or you suggest something that they can do, they're not going to do it because their eye is more on where is the next contract coming from.
Thank you. I mean, there's a hell of a lot of different things to unpick there. I think the one thing you said there that struck me again was that accumulative effect. It's often not one thing, it's a number of things. And I think when we spoke before as well, you were saying that sometimes they call about one thing, but they end up talking about another. But I think just to move the conversation on a little bit, I think one of the things that, you know, you said yourself, you get a snapshot. And I think what we often find in these is the data points that we have are relatively few as far as this goes. So, but behind that, I guess, is the idea that if we were going to start to kind of benchmark and start to look for something, we want some idea of what sort of good looks like, which brings me to you, Susanne, and what you're doing with the GMF, and because that's kind of what it's all about, right? Trying to find an idea that you can share of how to create the kind of environment we need.
Yes, thank you. And thank you for having me. It's a pleasure being part of this event and this panel. And I mean, referring to what is going on, we can't choose the geopolitical environment that we operate in, but we can choose how to respond to it. And one of the things that we aim to focus on at the Global Maritime Forum is finding ways to respond in a more sustainable way. And sustainability, both when it comes to environment, of course, but also in the way that we treat the people operating our vessels. And we are very privileged in the Urgo Alliance to have a lot of very ambitious companies that are sort of working together to drive and lead the positive change that we want to see. And I shamelessly brought our 2030 strategy, hoping that some of you will take a look. We put forward last year a 2030 ambition for what we hope to see by 2030. And it's been a long journey working together across our, I think, 36 member companies to align on what do we want to do. And with the strategy, we made 3 commitments. One is that we need better transparency. We tend to either speak very, very positively about life at sea, trying to make it sexy, or we see horror stories depicted in the media. Maybe the truth lies somewhere in between, but we need to be more open and honest and talk about what is out there. And there are a lot of good vessels out there, a lot of good sort of people leading, doing well as some bad ones. And so what we're aiming to do, the first commitment that we made as an alliance and that all our members have committed to is transparency. Let's put out, and we'll be doing that in October, a first report where we aim to draw a picture across our 4 strategic goals focused on safety, health, diversity and inclusion, and career paths at sea. And across 30 indicators, looking at what does it actually look like? How many hours of sea, of shore leave do people actually get? How many hours do people actually work? On an average, of course. And then we'll do the same thing within the Urgo Alliance so that we establish a benchmark. And then hopefully we'll see improvements from the baseline report coming out this year and what we'll see in 2030. So the first commitment from the Urgo Alliance members is that they'll share data and they'll help us develop this baseline. The second commitment is, in our first strategic period, we focused only on diversity, equity, and inclusion. and learned a lot about how do we make vessels more inclusive and attractive, especially to women, but to all crew members out there. And we developed our sustainable crewing guidelines. We learned a lot in that process. We could see we don't have to mix stuff up. We have members that are already doing a lot of good stuff. So what we do is basically we learn from those that do well, and then we develop guidelines based on that. And that's exactly what we'll be doing. So before 2030, across our 10 focus areas, we are not focusing on everything. There's a lot. We could have had 50 focus areas for improving lives at sea, but we opted for 10. And we'll develop 10 global standards where we aim to define what does good look like, what does better look like, and what does best look like. Maybe we'll end up with a trajectory towards 2030 that companies can benchmark against. And the most important thing by that, we want to do that in a way where they can be independently verified. So it's not based on what someone on shore decides, but based on actual verification. So we're working closely with class societies in that. And the final one is that we will work across the full value chain to explore how can we align financial incentives, but also operational incentives across the value chain. Right now, the cost of improving lives at sea sits largely with the owners, whereas the benefits come and are shared across the full value chain. So what we're exploring and engaging with all the stakeholders, how can we not just share the benefits, but also the costs? And that will be quite the journey. And the day before yesterday, we convened the members of the Alliance in London, and we had 29, committing to being involved in developing the standards. Those are just the first one. We hope that many more will join. But because the world needs to know, what does good look like? Right now, a lot of the lack of transparency means that the companies out there, end users out there, they don't know what good is and they don't know what bad is. But this is an opportunity to share what does good look like, and hopefully charters and customers can use those to ask questions. So this requires leadership, and in a time like this, this is where leadership is needed.
And ensuring that those kind of priorities can exist when people are just busy trying to keep the lights on, which brings me very neatly to you, David. You're owner, operator, dealing with the charterers and what they value and what they care about. And I just want to make another point as well, because I'm going to ask you a sort of fairly pointed question about, like, you know, all this is all very nice, but what's the commercial reality today of actually operating vessels under this? And the point I would just make before I kind of give that to you is that whilst people might be saying, well, it's terrible, people having to work in the Gulf and stuff, we're all of us as consumers relying very heavily on traffic coming through there, on not just oil, but sulfur for fertilizer, or the world's going to get in terrible trouble. So you're the guys at the pointy end. What's your perspective on?
Good morning, everybody, and thank you for inviting me along to your meeting today. So, as you can tell, I'm from the other end of the world, so if my accent is a bit hard to understand, I apologise for that. But I just thought I'd just start off with when I started in this industry 35 years ago. It was an old, crusty old ship's captain that smoked a pipe sitting in front of me, and he said to me that this industry is not for the faint-hearted, but we always find a way. So I thought I'd throw one of those quotes in there for. I might win the prize, Raal, I don't know, but I think from and if I start from my organisation, the ASP Ships Group, because I think there's two levels of how we deal with the issues, and Craig outlined all the issues we've probably had for the last 10 years, and if we go back the last 50, there's been a bunch more. So it's all around how you work yourself through those issues, and if I look at the sort of more the micro level, which is, say, my company, albeit we operate down the other end of the world, but I do have technical management business and crewing throughout the world, but it's all around the managing the whole risk profile, and to me it's all around the people. If you look at our industry, it's a little bit unique where, and this is I guess a positive for the cadets that are in the room today, is that we have an industry that's a little bit unique where you start as a cadet, go through all the ranks, you know, maybe they're 40, they decide they want to come ashore, then they start in a ship management company or a crew management company, and then they start again, right? They start learning again. So maybe another 5, 7 years, they become a fleet manager or a marine manager, and then maybe they become a general manager or CEO or an owner company, right? So probably by that time they're starting to get greyer hair like me, but I think from that side, and I guess the point I was trying to make, Raal, is that the people that are working through these issues, from whether they're geopolitical or whether they're localised, they have been to sea generally themselves, right? So they've seen a lot of things along the way, maybe not as many in the last 10 years that we've had to deal with, pandemics and whatever, but they are part of that team that is working through the issues, right? So I think, to me, that's a very important part. So it's all about communication, properly trained people, and if you're bringing your own people through your organisation, then you have trained them properly, and then it's all around managing that level of risk. So then I move through to the industry organisations, which IMEC is one of them, and I play around on a few of them. I'm the chairman of Maritime Industry Australia, and obviously in Australia, chair of New Zealand Shipping Federation in New Zealand, and I sit on the ICS board here in London. So from that end, I think there's a lot of decision making and discussion goes on any of these conflict issues. So you've got the micro level, which is the individual companies, ship managers, ship owners, whoever it is. Then you go into the industry side, which then it starts turning political. I mean, ICS works very closely with IMO, and I know with this particular conflict, and Stephen will be aware of that as well, that all of the major industry organisations have really tried to work on, and it's really a government issue, right? I mean, it's not something we can do sitting around this table. But
rather than get too sort of sucked into that, I think the bit that I'd be really interested to hear from you is you've got a situation where you've got this instability, global instability, which is causing for sort of operational improvisation, let's say. You've got technology coming into play. You've got all these kind of, new, Craig showed the wind-assisted propulsion and those sort of things. These are changing fundamental things about ship design, all that sort of stuff. And you've got those people that you're saying at the heart of it. What do you think are the real characteristics that you need and skills from that working population to really thrive in that environment?
I just think, I think Craig touched on it before as well. I mean, you really need people that have got a can-do attitude. I mean, the training's the training. You come up through whatever ranks you come through, whether you're on the technology side or you're the seafaring side, or it could be the finance side, because the important thing for me is that the whole organisation that's the ship owner or ship manager, crew manager, it's one team of people, right? And then it's all around communication, getting a hold of the information from on board the vessel, from your charterers, from the ports, whatever, because, let's be honest, it is an industry that has a lot of stress throughout the whole industry, I look at my crew managers, right? I mean, some of the stuff they had to deal with through the middle of the pandemic, trying to get people off vessels and whatever else. I mean, I was a little bit lucky. I own my own travel agency company as part of my group, so we had some chance of getting some flights. But it's I just think it's I'm a finance guy. I'm a chartered accountant, believe it or not. And I'm running a shipping company. Go figure. But the thing is, it's an industry that I actually really love. But we will roll with all the changes, right? I mean, we are at ASP. We're very supportive of some of the health issues that are out there. So we very openly encourage people to go and talk to someone, right?
It's interesting that you put up, because it's increasingly the thing, and we've seen it as well with people like Ockham focusing on behavioural competencies. Behaviour and attitude seems to be right up there on a par with training. But as far as that workforce kind of goes, and that, you've kind of been involved, Steve, with the Just Transition Task Force, which I helped out a little bit on that as well. And you're now having to kind of look at that and make that flesh, Francesco, through sort of the training fund and all that sort of stuff. I mean, one of the key tensions for me in that is that we've got this situation where we need to invest in people, But as Simon said, we're working in an environment which is contractor-based and is precarious in a way. In terms of, that seems to me to be a fundamental tension that needs to be resolved. I don't know if you want to come in on that.
Well, I think that's the fundamental question. And there's a lot of people in this room who I've had many discussions about. So I think it goes to that point that there is a positive. This industry will expose you to a different set of challenges than you will ever see in a rigid shore-based employment, which goes to conversation about the person's strength. So this is a really big positive in a world which is leaning so far towards technology. But the question about what do we do about the big question, I still feel, and I've been around and I listen to a lot of union stories that are very colourful and mostly can't be repeated, about the loss of traditional maritime seafarers' jobs. And then the emergence of the global south as part of the solution. And I've been around long enough to remember when Taiwanese and Koreans were the choice of seafarers to replace Brits, Americans, etc. But we're still employing in the same way. And to me, it's a fundamental mistake. So this is not a challenge to our friends in IMEC, because we have a model, and the model is unique in the whole world. Maritime is special because we can collaborate, and perhaps in a different way to any other sector I'm responsible, including civil aviation, which is sometimes used. But our problem is if we're about to, and I speak to all the ship managers in the room and the ship owners, we have too many different kinds of training. We have too many different kinds of employment. And the reality is, if we're about to invest millions, and I mean millions, probably billions, in training and education to make sure we can meet digitalisation, I for one don't believe that the automation of ships is anytime soon. And I say that with absolute confidence. You can come back to me, I hope, in 10 years and ask me that question. So the reality is, can't we do this better? Why would you not have a permanent employment contract? If you're going to invest per capita, all the stuff about well-being, I don't know, there's a lot of different shore-based companies here. Just one question, because you treat shore-based people training and personal development in a different way to we treat seafarers. So the whole package has to be looked up, thrown up in the air and looked at again.
Well, we'll come back to that, but I've got to give right of reply.
And I could take this in a controversial way, but I won't. We have a partnership, and the partnership is all about that journey, because there isn't the one extreme where people are being exploited and the other extreme where people have the ideal job with the ideal terms and conditions. There is a journey to get from one place to the other, and I think we are the vehicle that will facilitate that journey. Because currently, if you look, for example, let's look back at the Gulf. There's vessels that have been operating in the Gulf way before any of this happened, where an AB is paid $300. Okay? Now, if you're in an IBF agreement, the least you can be paid is 5 times that. So there is a journey, and there is the starting point, i.e. the $300, and the end point, what best looks like. We're facilitating the movement of the industry from that initial place to where ideally we want to get to. The one thing that we are doing is we're doing it sustainably, because ultimately there's something else that people need to keep in mind, and that is these are businesses, and their purpose, unlike IMEC, who is a non-profit, their purpose is to make profit. So clearly, what we are trying to do now is to muster as many as possible of this coalition of the willing under the IMEC membership or under other arrangements that actually push the needle further and further towards what best looks like. And I think that's something that we want to take credit for, because I think the IBF in itself is that tool. As Steve was saying, there is no other such arrangement in any other industry anywhere in the world. This is a tool that is meant to create a level playing field in an industry that's truly global. So nobody focuses on what is a farmer paid in India versus what is a farmer paid somewhere else. But because it's such a global platform, there are those sort of conversations in shipping. And I think, yes, the arrival point is best.
Something like that.
How easily do we all get there? That's a different conversation.
Susanne, I can see you're eager to jump in. Which point were you? Yeah.
Yes, I think there is now I'm probably going to be a little bit unpopular because we are in a space where we focus a lot on training and we're in a panel talking about data. But there is a tendency in this industry. Now, I haven't been in the industry for that many years, but we tend to often think that when we have problems, the solutions are either more data or more training. And I think there is a third thing that we also need to focus on, which are the conditions and the environment in which we work. When we talk about the seafarers that we want to attract, the skills that we need, there is an enormous need to also look more closely at what is the environment in which the work is taking place, the fatigue, and what are the things that we can do to actually make conditions at sea more appealing and more attractive. And that sits probably somewhere in between the need for seafarers and the training, but it's also on the accountability of the entire industry. We've seen collaboration in the Persian Gulf, how we can work together on solving problems.
Before you get off the point, you've given me a bit of you've teed up a ball which I intend to hit firmly into the net, which is that you mentioned we should be talking a bit about data. That is what we were supposed to talk about. And you talked about observing work and how that's done and technology and so on. There are technologies coming now that are sold on the premise that they can read information from VDR, picking up from emails, a human data point, let's call it. So we're very used to having lots of sensors on ships and lots of all that sort of stuff has been our bread and butter. But we're now entering this era of saying, well, actually, we need to find out more about the people data. We need more sources of that data. And we can't ask people to input more because they're doing all these busy jobs. But hey, we've got AI now. We can take video feeds and etc. But that also raises a lot of questions about privacy and all that sort of stuff. Do you see that as is that something that you see as a vector? And do you think it's a good thing or a bad thing?
Well, again, it's probably somewhere in between. I think there is a lot of potential in us better understanding what the real challenges are. And data can definitely help us, but we need real, actual data. We have a tendency when we see a safety challenge that we add on an extra checklist. So we have a lot of safety clutter at sea. And the last thing I would want to do in order for us to learn what is important is to add more more checklists for us. But there is an enormous potential in being able to detect fatigue earlier, in being able to one of the first standards that we're developing is focused on abuse and harassment. Some of the horrible stories that we're collecting now through our Unspoken project, where people come forward sharing their stories or experiences with sexual misconduct. CCTV is something that will make a lot of people more safe because that's what protects you, right? So there's an enormous potential in being able to protect people, but obviously there's then the other extreme that a lot of health data is owned not by you as an individual, but by the company that you work for, right? So that's
let me bring Simon in on this point, because you mentioned there about some misgivings about they didn't want to talk to an AI. Have you got any sense of how seafarers feel about this sort of data capture that's kind of increasingly being promoted as a means of kind of, it's all about safety as the focus, but of course.
No, it's not being mentioned in particular, but I think a lot of what we hear is about where do these initiatives come from? What's the purpose of them? Is it to make the ship more effective, or is it actually to help the crew? And really, the industry has to ask itself, what is the purpose of this? All right, so if you actually focus on the people and you actually make them feel safer and more secure and you look after their welfare, actually that does make things more effective. But it's when it comes from the point of view of, you're not thinking about the people, you're just thinking about the commercial imperatives. We did some work recently on decarbonisation and the impact on seafarers' well-being, because nobody was really talking about it. And on the positive side, what seafarers were telling us was that actually they were really excited to be at the forefront of technological change. That was something that really inspired them. But their biggest concern was actually when something goes wrong, who's going to get the blame? And we don't talk enough, I think, about psychological safety, the ability to be able to flag something up when you don't feel that something is right. And that is as important as physical safety. And I think we need to be talking about that much more. As new technology comes in, people have got to be able to learn how to use it. They need the confidence to be able to say, I don't understand. While we're on quotations, the one that I always think of is, we shape the tools and then the tools shape us. And, that's really pertinent in this day and age.
He's thrown his
technology is coming on.
That's a good one. That's a good one.
Do I get the prize?
It's for others to judge, but it's a good one for me. I just want to wrap up now. I mean, time has got away from us a little bit, and I'd like to hear from everybody with a very kind of short answer. The question I'm posing to you all is that with all this transformation going on, we've established we have to look at new models. We have to look at how things need to change. From your perspective, we talked about data into decisions. We've got a lot of information. We need to, we're often constrained in our decision making. But if we were to really think creatively about how we would design this differently, if we're going to rip it up and change the models and so on, what would you like to see done differently? And I'll come to you, David, first.
I mean, I guess it's probably well known around this room that we're probably one of the over-audited industries in the world, right? Every ship is audited to death, every office is audited to death. But I think with new technology, I think what would be nice to see is that it was used to take some of that stress and some of that over-auditing out of the picture. But I guess when you're starting to talk new technology as well, the regulations will come with it, right? So it's a bit like what's happening with Facebook and social media, right? So everybody's scrambling now to put some rules around it, right? So maybe the rules should come first and then we design a better system, I don't know. But my view is that any of this technology should be around making it easier for the crews and the people in the office to operate a shipping business, right?
Yep. So, a few things in there, but maybe harmonising this auditing process and regulation stuff.
But just on I think there was a mention of cameras on board vessels before. I mean, I've got a live issue at the moment where the crew don't want cameras on board, so so it's I guess it spins both ways, right?
Yeah. But let's keep on the topic to round this up. But Francesco, what would you do if you had a blank piece of paper? How would you design things differently?
If I had a blank piece of paper, one of the things that seems to be a leading theme these days is AI. I would ask AI to re-engineer this. I mean, this is something that the kids on that table are very, very familiar with. I mean, we had a competition, an IMEC competition, and I had to review all of the entries, and there was a lot of them. And there was very heavy use of AI, and they produced stuff that I would not dream of being able to do that. So maybe that's where AI can help, where AI can actually make our lives easier. I am a recent convert. And I could tell. I must admit, it is incredible the stuff you can achieve. Of course, you need to make sure that you are sense checking it. Yeah. But there is a very, very powerful tool there that's currently being incredibly underutilized. Okay. And I have 3 children, and they make very, very heavy use of it. And I'm constantly astonished at what they come up with.
So you would take all of the problems that we have, put it in AI, see what comes up. Well, someone could start that now. It'd probably be done by the end of the panel. So
probably be done by the end of the next person's opinion. Yes.
Let's go, Susanne. Just a quick answer, please. We've got to wrap it up. But what would you do?
So I would start out with transparency. Sort of in my sort of dream of this sector, it would be that we had a more transparent setup where it's easy to know whether, as a cadet, as an officer, whether you go on board a certified good vessel or a certified bad vessel.
Yeah.
Today we don't know, and customers, the IKEAs of the world, they will know. Is this a good or a bad or a better or a best vessel? So that we have that transparency. And I'm sure AI, if we are not enabling that ourselves, AI will do it.
Well, it's certainly,
so we might as well get started
it's
and
certainly
be willing
easier to go through the receipts, isn't it?
Yeah.
Steve, please keep it brief because we've got to wrap it up.
Thanks for asking me to make it brief. So there's a lot of things I want to say. Cameras, we have to be very careful, and we have to talk about what is it for. I could talk about warehouses and productivity, and you would be ashamed. If you're asking what we need to do, and I think that's clear, and I kind of teased David a little bit yesterday, and it goes to that conversation, there's probably too many employers' organisations, which means a lot of our time is spent talking. So if we really agree that we want to make sure the next generation and the generation after that, we have to do the holistic position about what is a good job, what's a good job for, and I left school at 15 a long time ago, is completely different to leaving a school in India, and their expectations are completely different. So we have to change our mindset. And part of changing that mindset is not ticking boxes, really understanding. Data, we could produce the ITF Inspectorate reports, 138 around the world, but I actually think we ought to sit in the middle of the room and talk about what is the data we need to share. Because one person's horror story could be another person's success, and we really need the question about data for all of us. I've got a 24-year-old and a 27-year-old, and when they're arguing with me, it does happen, they'll look at ChatGPT and tell me stuff, and I'm like, I don't want that. I want individuals to have the capacity to have a life experience and make their own decisions. I'm not going to compete on the quotes, so you can measure that one as a good answer or not. The reality is you've got to have an individual position to make a future difference.
That's the short answer. Thanks. No, thank you. So Simon, I got the idea for this question from when we were on a group together out in Manila, and you said something. We were talking about how we're going to market seafaring to people, and you said you don't go to market unless you got the product right. How do we get the product right? Take us home.
The things that it's a great question, actually, just thinking about how would you design it today. I think one of the things is actually you need to look at the hierarchical structure and make it more modern and something that is designed to get the best out of people. I'd like to see an industry whereby welfare organisations are pretty much redundant because welfare is brought to the centre. Seafarers are brought to the centre in every discussion rather than just being on the periphery. I think there needs to be a system whereby psychological safety is built into everything. And lastly, only tech that is going to be a servant and not a master. Those are the things, those are the principles I would be thinking of.
Pretty good design principles, I think, and some great ideas from everybody on the panel. I think it just remains for me to say thank you to the panel and for all of you for your kind attention. Thank you, everyone.